this now. The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation is demanding that people guilty of PPE tender fraud face consequences. The foundation recently hosted an online rally against PPE corruption. Those who attended demanded accountability and transparency. The foundation's chairperson, Derek Hanekom, expressed how rampant corruption is inside the ANC government. Let's get more on those developments now and what was said at that rally from the foundation's executive director, Neeshan Balton. Neeshan, thank you so much for joining us. He's live for us via Skype from in Johannesburg. An online rally that was held, part of the new normal that we're now becoming used to during these unprecedented times that we're living through. Some would say that perhaps that would have meant the rally wouldn't have had the spirit that other rallies of this nature would normally have had, but some strong comments coming from the speakers like Derek Hanekom, Tuli Madonsela, Zwelenzima Vavi, Cynthia Stimple, and the list goes on. What did you take away from this get-together?
Thank you very much. I think what we took from this rally, whilst it was online, many have commented that it gave them hope, it gave them encouragement, that the attitudes and the feeling of hopelessness about tackling the scale of corruption was somewhat diminished, because we brought together sectors from all across society to indicate the level of anger, the level of disappointment with the specifically COVID-19 corruption that we have now all come to hear about and see about daily. So the key takeaway here was that society as a whole is angry, and were it not for the COVID-19 restrictions, you possibly would have seen thousands of South Africans into the streets demonstrating that anger. But this particular rally, I think, gave vent to the kind of frustration and anger of South Africans, articulated through the organizations and the various people who spoke from those organizations and sectors at the rally itself.
Now, I think we can all admit that South Africa had a problem with corruption long before we ever heard of coronavirus or COVID-19, or the term that we all use now, lockdown. But I think we'd also agree there was a massive sagging of national shoulders when it became apparent that corruption had also found its way into relief efforts to the communities that needed it most during these very, very difficult times. And in as much as you say that if these were normal times, people would have taken to the streets, they have shown their anger. They've shown their anger before, long before the country started dealing with this pandemic. What is so different now, and what are you hoping will change from the reaction, especially from law enforcement and government, to the kinds of corruption that we're seeing now?
What I think the outrage is about the moral depravity of stealing funds from at the time when it was needed most by the poor and sick and frontline health workers. What I think is different now is the scale and the depth of this anger, and we think that has resulted in for the very first time, you're seeing the release of tender information, which I think many have argued for a long while should be made public. So that kind of information is starting to be released. And from that, I think we're beginning to understand the details of this corruption. Secondly, I think you're seeing for the very first time also through the SIU and the Hawks and others, a level of arrests and freezing of accounts with such speed that has never really happened before. So I think that the pressure is starting to pay off, but would need to be sustained as well.
There is a concern, though, that it almost becomes a shrug of the shoulders reaction now that ordinary South Africans have to this kind of thing. Even before one of the president's addresses had closed down and was cold in one's ears when he announced that South Africa was going to the international platform to try and get funds that it needed to try and dig itself out of the economic hole the pandemic had thrown us into. Just generally, people are like, oh, well, that money's as good as gone. That must be quite a dangerous precedent as well, that people will become indifferent to this kind of corruption at such an important stage.
I think, yes, it would be very dangerous for South Africans to become indifferent because corruption precisely destroys trust, it destroys public institutions, and it would thrive off that kind of indifference. But we can't afford that because for this democracy to fall apart, the consequences, I think, for the country as a whole are just too dire. But my sense is that the level of indifference is not as great as it might be made out to be. And I think from this rally itself, from business, from labor, from all faith communities, the sense we got here was that people are going to make their anger known. They are going to make their voices louder about this current situation, because we all realize what is at stake. And what is at stake is not just the looting from COVID-19, but in our view, it's the entire program of democracy that is at risk in this country, and we can't allow that.
Indeed, we can't. Thank you so much for your time this morning. That's Neeshan Balton. He's the Executive Director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, joining us live via Zoom, I believe it is, from here in Johannesburg, giving us a synopsis of the views that was expressed at the Ahmed Kathrada corruption rally that was held just a couple of days ago.